She wasn't speeding, she wasn't swerving, and yet blue and red lights flooded her rearview mirror like a bad omen. Camille Turner, FBI Director for the Atlanta Division, was less than 10 minutes from home when it happened. A quiet road, no traffic. Just her and the night, until Officer Kyle Monroe showed up with his ego and a badge. She pulled over, calm, composed, not because she wasn't rattled, but because black women in America don't get the luxury of panic. When he stepped out of the cruiser, the way he walked said it all. He wasn't stopping a driver. He was hunting a problem. He didn't say hello. He didn't state a reason. Just barked, "License and registration." Camille looked him straight in the eye. "Was there a reason I was stopped?" "You looked suspicious," he shrugged. "Suspicious?" Not illegal, not unsafe. Suspicious. She'd heard that word before. Every black professional in America has. But what Monroe didn't know, what would haunt him within the next hour, was that the woman he was trying to intimidate had more federal clearance than his entire department. And she wasn't just any citizen. She was the one people called when local law enforcement went off the rails. But tonight, she wasn't Director Turner. She was just another black woman with a target on her back. He thought he had power. She knew she had the truth, and that was the beginning of his downfall. Officer Kyle Monroe's flashlight flicked directly into Camille's face, sweeping across her eyes like a searchlight at a prison break. "Step out of the vehicle," he ordered. His hand was now hovering near his holster. That wasn't protocol. That was intimidation. Camille recognized it instantly. She'd trained hundreds of agents to spot it in hostile environments. She never thought she'd need to use that training on a back road in Savannah, not against someone sworn to protect. She didn't flinch. She didn't blink. Instead, she spoke with a voice that could have been mistaken for silk, if not for the steel underneath. "I will not obey illegal orders, officer." Silence. The kind of silence that tightens the air like a noose. Kyle Monroe's jaw tensed. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," Camille replied, her eyes locked on his. "Unless you can articulate a lawful reason for this stop and a legal basis for removing me from my vehicle, I will remain seated. And everything you say and do is being recorded." She tapped the dashboard-mounted camera once, just enough for him to notice the blinking red light. He scoffed. "That's supposed to scare me?" "No," Camille said smoothly. "It's supposed to protect both of us." Monroe's posture shifted. The bravado didn't vanish, but the mask slipped just a little. He wasn't used to pushback. He especially wasn't used to a black woman asserting her rights with the precision of a constitutional scholar. Because Camille Turner was one. "Do you think this is a game?" he barked. "Do you think quoting law and filming me gives you some kind of special protection?" "No," she answered. "I think the Constitution gives me that, and I think your training, if you had any worth remembering, should have too." That hit a nerve. Monroe stepped closer, the brim of his hat shadowing half his face, the other half lit by the harsh glare of her headlights. The glow made the tension in his clenched jaw look carved in stone. "I'm giving you one last warning," he hissed. "Get out of the damn car." Camille slowly placed both hands on the steering wheel. "Open, visible, no officer." "I don't feel safe exiting this vehicle without a supervisor present." Camille had faced down drug lords, arms traffickers, and foreign agents. She'd walked through compounds in Kandahar with a vest and sidearm and come home to fight corruption in boardrooms just as dangerous. But this quiet road, this one officer, this badge turned into a threat. This was personal. Because Monroe didn't see a highly decorated federal agent. He saw a black woman alone in a nice car. and that was all he needed to pull a weapon. It was subtle, but she saw it. The way his fingers curled tighter around the grip of his gun. He was weighing it. She could feel it in the silence between his breath and his next move. "I'm warning you," he began. "And I've already warned you," Camille cut in, voice low but razor sharp. "You are seconds away from turning a bad stop into a federal offense. Think very, very carefully about what you do next." He hesitated, and that hesitation, brief as it was everything. Camille used the moment to hit a button on her phone. Live recording. Secure cloud upload. Location pinged. She wasn't bluffing. She never had to. That was the next line out of Monroe's mouth. Not a question. A sneer. Camille didn't smile, but there was something electric in the stillness of her reply. "I'm Camille Turner," she said slowly, "Director of the FBI, Atlanta Division." Monroe blinked. The weight of her words didn't hit all at once. It sank in like cold water slipping down a spine. "That's a lie," he spat. "No, officer. The lie," she said, pausing, "is that you thought I was powerless." "You think that title means something here?" "Yes," she replied without missing a beat. "It means I know the law better than you. And it means I've got enough jurisdiction to make sure this footage ends your career by sunrise." Monroe took one step back, then another. He wasn't retreating, yet, but the fire in his eyes had dulled. Rage had turned to calculation. He was trying to claw his way out of a mistake that had already gone too far. "You got proof?" he barked. Camille didn't answer. She didn't need to. The moment was already bigger than him. Bigger than both of them. It was about every person who had been pulled over for being the wrong color in the wrong neighborhood and told to cooperate or else. "You are being live-streamed to a secure FBI database," she said flatly. "I suggest you holster your weapon and call your supervisor right now." Monroe's hand lingered near his belt, but slowly, reluctantly, he stepped back. The gun stayed where it was. For now. Camille exhaled slowly and controlled, measured. She'd held the line, not just for herself, but for every woman who'd been told to shut up and comply. For every citizen who knew the law but was treated like a threat. Not this time. She wasn't just recording this moment. She was rewriting the ending. Power doesn't come from volume. It comes from knowing exactly when to speak. For a split second, it was silent. No wind, no crickets, no breath. Just the sharp click of a thumb unlocking a holster and the cold steel of a service pistol clearing its sheath. Officer Kyle Monroe pulled his gun, held it level. Pointed it directly at Camille Turner's forehead through the windshield of her parked SUV. The red and blue lights behind him pulsed over his face like a warning from a god he no longer feared. "Get out of the car!" he shouted. But Camille didn't move, didn't flinch. Didn't even blink. She stared down the barrel of the gun like she'd seen it all before. Because she had. Kyle's fingers were shaking. His words were loud, but his eyes betrayed uncertainty, not fear of her. No, fear of what he might have just done. In his mind, Camille was still just a black woman refusing to follow orders. One of those types who thought they were smarter than the badge, who thought reading the law gave them power. He didn't know who she was. "Not yet. You think you can talk circles around me, huh?" he growled. "You think a fancy tone and a dashboard camera make you bulletproof?" Camille didn't respond. Instead, she reached for her phone. Slowly, deliberately. Every movement was exaggerated so there could be no misunderstanding. Kyle twitched. "Drop that phone." She ignored him. The screen lit up. She tapped a single contact. No search, no hesitation. Leon Briggs, police chief. The call connected in 2 rings. "Leon, it's Camille," she said. Her voice wasn't rushed. It wasn't scared. It was cold. Measured. The voice of a federal officer who'd briefed presidents and interrogated war criminals. "There's an officer named Kyle Monroe on Route 9, near Bluff Creek. He's pointing a loaded firearm at my face. I'm unarmed, sitting in my car. I need you here. Now." On the other end, silence. Then, "Camille." "What?" "He doesn't know who I am, Leon," she said, her eyes never leaving Kyle's. "And I don't think he cares." She hung up. "What was that?" Kyle asked, his voice cracking for the first time. Camille tilted her head slightly, finally speaking, not for him, but for the camera still recording everything. "That was your boss." Kyle's grip tightened. His mouth opened, closed. Words died on his tongue, because something had shifted. Her calm wasn't fear, it was power, and now he knew it. Less than 3 minutes passed, but for Kyle, they felt like hours. Then in the distance, faint at first, then louder, the sound of sirens cutting through the still Savannah night like a scythe through wheat. Kyle looked back. 1 patrol cruiser, then 2, then a third. From the lead car, a tall, broad-shouldered black man in plain clothes stepped out. No lights. No commotion. Just a slow, deliberate walk toward the scene. Kyle lowered his weapon, but it was too late. The man's badge gleamed in the moonlight. Police Chief Leon Briggs. "Monroe!" Briggs called out, his voice low but thundering. "Put the damn gun down." Kyle took 2 steps back. "Chief, I thought—" Briggs cut him off with a look. "You thought what?" he barked. That drawing on an unarmed citizen was procedure now? That you could play God with a gun and a flashlight? "I didn't know who she was," Kyle said, voice high and shaking. "That's the problem," Briggs exploded, stepping closer. "You didn't know, and you didn't care. You didn't stop to ask. You saw a black woman in a nice car and assumed she didn't belong." He turned to Camille. She had stepped out of the vehicle now, calm, still recording. Leon's eyes met hers. They dropped, just slightly. "Director Turner," he said, voice softer. "Are you okay?" Camille nodded once, then spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. "I'm fine, but your department is not." Behind them, the other officers were frozen. They had seen enough. They saw Monroe draw a weapon on someone who had not resisted. They saw the woman he demeaned reveal herself as the highest-ranking law enforcement official in the region. And they saw the storm that was now coming for all of them. "I want his badge," Camille said, her tone unshaken. "And I want your full cooperation in the investigation that's about to follow." Kyle finally broke. He turned to Briggs. "She set me up. She played me." Briggs didn't answer. He just looked at the squad car behind them, then nodded. 2 officers approached Kyle. They didn't shout. They didn't warn. They just took his gun, his badge, and read him his rights, right there on the side of the road. For a moment, the world turned upside down. "You know what this looks like?" Kyle said bitterly as he was cuffed. "You're doing this for show." "No," Camille said quietly, stepping beside him. "This is the show, for every woman you've talked to, for every black driver you've harassed, for every time you thought the badge made you immune." Briggs exhaled hard, turning to Camille. "Can we talk in private?" Camille nodded. The two walked several feet away, just beyond earshot of the cruisers. "This is bad," Briggs said. "Real bad. The media's going to rip us apart." Camille's response was like a gavel dropping. "Then let it. Maybe that's what it takes for change to stick." Briggs nodded slowly. He knew she was right. As the cuffs clicked closed around Kyle Monroe's wrists and the red and blue lights washed over his face, he finally looked back at Camille Turner. But she wasn't looking at him. She was staring past him, toward the horizon. Toward every person like her who'd been stopped and silenced, and for the first time all night, she smiled, not out of triumph, but out of certainty, because the real war hadn't ended. It had just begun. The air was still tense when the second siren screamed into the night, long, sharp, and unmistakably commanding. A black SUV, unmarked but unmistakably official, skidded to a stop beside the patrol cars. The door flung open before the engine even shut off. Out stepped Sheriff Leon Briggs, broad-shouldered, clean-cut, in a pressed uniform that bore the weight of 2 decades of service, and a face that showed he didn't suffer fools, not even in his own ranks. He didn't walk. He stormed. "Who the hell pointed a gun?" he barked, his voice echoing through the trees. Silence. Camille stood tall, her expression unreadable, phone still in hand, camera still recording. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Kyle Monroe was already shrinking into himself. Briggs turned toward him. "Monroe, you didn't—" "I didn't know who she was," Kyle blurted out, his face red, eyes wide. "She refused to step out of the vehicle. I thought she was—" "What?" Briggs snapped. "You thought she was dangerous because she was black? You thought she was lying because she didn't shrink when you raised your voice?" He stepped in so close that Kyle had to look up. "You're done." "Sheriff Briggs," Camille said calmly. Her voice didn't carry heat, just steel. "I assume you've already realized who I am." Briggs turned to face her, and for the first time the weight of the situation registered fully in his eyes. "Director Turner," he said, almost a whisper. "Ma'am, I had no idea." "I know," she replied. "Neither did he. That's the problem." Briggs nodded slowly, then turned back to Kyle. "Give me your weapon." Kyle's mouth opened, but nothing came out. His hand hovered near his holster like a man trying to pretend it wasn't happening. "I said," Briggs repeated, slower, deadlier, "give me your damn weapon." "Now." Reluctantly, Kyle unfastened the holster, pulled the gun, and handed it over. Briggs checked the chamber. Loaded. Safety off. He clenched his jaw. "You pulled a live weapon on an unarmed federal officer. A woman is sitting in her car, and you did it with nothing to back your suspicion except your own bias." Kyle tried to respond, tried to plead. But the words just weren't there. Briggs turned to the other officers on the scene. "Cuff him." 2 officers, one Hispanic, one black, moved quickly. There was no bravado, no shouting, just the cold procedural silence of professionalism. They knew the script. And Kyle knew he had just become the villain in it. His wrists clicked in the metal embrace of the cuffs he'd tightened on so many others. For the first time in his career, he was on the other end of the badge, and Camille Turner was watching. Not with joy, but with the cold gaze of a woman who had fought too many battles to celebrate a predictable fall. As Kyle was led away, Briggs turned to Camille again. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "I take full responsibility for this incident, and I assure you, a full investigation will be launched immediately. There will be no cover-up." "No spin." "I don't want apologies," she replied. "I want accountability. I want records pulled." I want his previous stops reviewed, body cam footage audited, every complaint filed against him was unearthed. You'll have it. And I want it in writing. You'll get it. Briggs gestured to a junior officer. Get a statement team out here now. Start logging every minute of this encounter. The officer nodded and jogged back to his car. Briggs faced Camille. I know this doesn't undo what just happened, Director Turner, and I can't promise this department is perfect. But I can promise you, Kyle Monroe's badge will never touch another citizen again. Camille finally let her breath go. I believe you, Sheriff, but I won't stop here. This isn't just about me. This is about every other person he's pulled over and intimidated without a camera watching. Briggs nodded grimly. Then let's make sure this one counts. Within minutes, phones started buzzing across the county. Someone had live-streamed the entire standoff. From the moment Kyle raised his voice to the moment Camille said her name, the world stopped. By midnight, the hashtags were trending. Camille Turner, Warnster wrong black woman. Justice doesn't blink. By dawn, news vans were lined up along the street. The story wasn't just about a rogue cop anymore. It was about a city reckoning with its policing culture and the woman who refused to bow to the gun pointed at her head. As the crowd thickened, one reporter broke through the barrier of flashing cameras and asked Camille a question she'd heard too many times before. Director Turner, are you going to press charges? She turned to face the reporter. Her words came slowly and deliberately. This isn't about charges. It's about change. I didn't survive this encounter just to make one man pay. I'm here to force an entire system to look in the mirror. She paused. And I intend to hold it there until it blinks. Back at the precinct, Leon Briggs issued a public statement. Officer Kyle Monroe was suspended indefinitely without pay, pending internal and federal investigation. The state attorney general had been notified. The FBI was already reviewing body cam data, and a task force was being assembled. For the first time in years, Savannah's police force was forced to look inward. And Camille Turner. She wasn't done, not even close. Savannah, Georgia. Chatham County Courthouse. 8:47 a.m. The marble steps leading up to the courthouse were soaked with morning dew, but the crowd gathering on the lawn didn't seem to care. Reporters, activists, former officers, college students, and local pastors, dozens had come to witness what many were calling a pivotal moment in Georgia's policing history. 2 months had passed since that night on a quiet road when Officer Kyle Monroe pointed a loaded gun at a black woman for not obeying. 2 months since he found out, too late, that the woman he threatened wasn't just another target. She was Camille Turner, FBI Director of the Atlanta Bureau. And today, he was the one on trial. Inside, the gallery was full. Every seat is taken. Every breath held. Kyle Monroe sat at the defense table in a dark gray suit, his once cocky posture reduced to hunched silence. His lawyer, a seasoned defense attorney from Savannah, leaned close and whispered something to him, but Kyle didn't respond. His hands were clenched so tightly that the knuckles were white. Across from him, Camille Turner sat in the first row behind the prosecution. She wore no badge. No blazer, just a simple navy dress and a gaze that could cut glass. She wasn't here as an FBI director. She was here as a citizen demanding justice. The prosecutor, Assistant District Attorney Rachel Kim, rose. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," she began, "what you will see today is not up for debate. The facts are not clouded. The law is not vague." She clicked the remote. On the screen, the dashcam footage began to play alongside Camille's dashboard phone recording. 2 angles, 2 timelines, 1 undeniable truth. They watched Kyle Monroe knock on her window, demand ID without cause. They heard him grow hostile, his tone escalating from cold to condescending to outright threatening. And then, the moment, the gun, drawn, cocked, aimed, the courtroom went silent. Even the judge, a stern man with 20 years on the bench, shifted in his seat. Camille's voice, recorded on her phone, echoed, "You are breaking the law, officer. I demand that you drop your weapon immediately." This is an overreach of authority. Then the call to Sheriff Briggs, then the sirens, then the takedown. Kyle's attorney tried to salvage what he could. He blamed job stress. He cited ambiguous behavior from Camille. He argued that Monroe felt unsafe in the dark, rural area. But the jury wasn't buying it, and neither was Camille. When called to the stand, she delivered testimony that was calm, direct, and devastating. This wasn't about fear. This was about power. He didn't see a threat. He saw a challenge, and when I refused to submit, he escalated. He didn't see my title. He didn't see my career. He saw a black woman who dared to ask, why? Her voice didn't rise. It didn't shake. It simply landed, like a gavel. After 3 days of witness testimony, character references, and the defense's increasingly desperate attempts to shift blame, the jury retired. They returned in 4 hours. The courtroom stilled as the foreperson stood. We, the jury, find the defendant, Kyle Monroe, guilty on all counts. Abuse of authority, racially motivated misconduct, reckless endangerment, violation of civil rights. Judge Whitaker turned to Kyle. You dishonored your badge, your oath, and the very laws you were sworn to uphold. You abused your power in a way that not only endangered an innocent person, but further fractured the trust between police and the communities they serve. He paused. For that, I sentence you to 4 years in state prison. No possibility of parole for the first 2. As the sentence was read, Kyle Monroe didn't cry. But his eyes dropped. His body deflated. For the first time in his life, he was truly powerless. Camille didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply stood and walked out, her footsteps echoing through the aisle like a closing chapter. But it wasn't the end. The trial didn't just end a career. It sparked a movement. City council meetings turned into public forums on police reform. The Savannah PD, under mounting pressure, introduced mandatory racial bias training and independent civilian oversight for all misconduct cases. Other cities across Georgia began to review their use of force policies. Sheriff Leon Briggs, once criticized for his neutrality, now stood side by side with Camille Turner at community town halls. And Camille. She returned to Atlanta, but not quietly. She began working with lawmakers to draft the Turner Initiative, a federal oversight proposal requiring body cam audits, psychological evaluations, and community accountability boards in all federally funded police departments. She wasn't just reacting anymore. She was building something. At a press conference 1 week after the verdict, a reporter asked Camille if she felt justice had been served. She paused before answering. Justice, she said, isn't a prison sentence. It's a system that protects the innocent before it punishes the guilty. Today was accountability. Tomorrow has to be changed. The crowd applauded. But Camille wasn't basking in the spotlight. She was already planning her next move. It began with a dashboard camera and a woman who refused to be silenced. The footage of FBI Director Camille Turner calmly confronting Officer Kyle Monroe, then standing motionless as he pointed a loaded weapon at her, went viral within hours of the trial. But this wasn't just another headline lost in the flood of outrage. It was a reckoning. One woman stood firm, and the whole system had to answer. Cable news networks looped the video for days. Social media erupted. Clips of Camille's courtroom testimony were dubbed the speech of the year by some, a masterclass in grace under pressure by others. One line echoed everywhere. "He didn't see my badge. He saw my skin." It cut through noise like a blade, piercing, undeniable. The country had heard stories of injustice before. But this time, it came from the director of the FBI in Atlanta. This time, there was video, voice, and verdict. No excuses. No what-ifs. No escape. Camille never wanted to be a public figure. She preferred courtrooms over cameras, strategy over speeches. But after the trial, there was no going back. Every week brought new invitations. 60 Minutes, MSNBC, NPR, college panels, police reform symposiums. At first, she declined. Then she reconsidered. "If I have the platform," she told a friend, "I'm damn well going to use it." And use it she did. She launched the Turner Equity Foundation, an organization dedicated to anti-racism training for law enforcement and government workers, legal aid grants for victims of civil rights violations, youth engagement on rights education and police interactions. The slogan? No uniform above the law, no voice beneath it. Under mounting pressure, Governor Sylvia Morales called an emergency summit on statewide policing practices. In attendance, mayors, DAs, sheriffs, civil rights attorneys, and, yes, Camille Turner. In the tense first hour, some law enforcement leaders pushed back. One case shouldn't undo decades of progress. Camille sat quietly. Until she didn't. She stood. And in a voice that silenced the room, she said, "You're right. One case shouldn't have to. But here we are, because no one before me had enough rank to be believed." The room went still. Then, slowly, heads began to nod. That night, the state passed the Emergency Accountability Package. Mandatory racial bias training for every officer in Georgia. Body cam footage to be released within 48 hours of use of force incidents. Creation of an independent citizens review board for all police misconduct cases. And a new rule: any officer drawing a weapon must file a use of force justification report, even if no shot is fired. Despite the wave of support, Camille stayed cautious. She knew how easily public attention fades and how fiercely old systems cling to survival. In an interview with PBS, she said, "I'm not interested in revenge. I'm interested in redesign. I want a system where a mother doesn't have to pray, her son makes it home every night. I want officers trained to de-escalate, not dominate." That clarity made her something rare in today's chaos, a leader who didn't just speak truth, but moved people to act on it. Within 6 months of the Chatham County trial, 32 local police departments across Georgia had adopted the Turner Initiative guidelines. In counties like Bibb, Dougherty, and Lowndes, places once reluctant to embrace reform, things began to shift. Officers now attend quarterly community dialogue sessions. New recruits went through immersive simulations on racial bias. Veteran cops had to re-qualify on de-escalation protocols. Not everyone welcomed the change. Some officers resigned, but others stayed and grew. Officer Marcus Wynn from Troup County put it best. "I joined the force to protect people. That starts with listening." The training Camille's team brought in, "It's the first time I've felt we're building trust, not fear." Camille's story wasn't just a legal case. It was a mirror, held up to a system that had been looking away for too long. And in that reflection, Americans saw something uncomfortable. They saw how easily authority becomes aggression. How quickly does a procedure become persecution? and how desperately the nation needs leaders who refuse to look away. Camille returned to work at the FBI, but her days were never the same. She trained young agents with a new urgency. She oversaw reforms in federal-local law enforcement partnerships. She built alliances with community organizations once wary of government suits. But more than anything, she listened to mothers, to veterans, to teenagers, to officers trying to do better. Because one thing she knew, more than anything else, policy without empathy is just paperwork. Justice without action is just performance. Months after the verdict, Camille was asked at a college commencement what gave her the courage to stand her ground that night. She paused, then said, "I wasn't brave. I was just tired. Tired of saying yes to things that were wrong. Tired of waiting for someone else to speak up. Tired of being quiet to stay safe. So I stopped being quiet." The crowd rose. The applause was thunderous. But Camille only smiled, then walked off stage, back to work. The press room at City Hall was packed. Journalists lined the walls, their cameras pointed like loaded rifles. Civil rights activists, federal agents, and citizens filled every row. The air was tense, part anticipation, part reckoning. Behind the podium stood Camille Turner, not just as the director of the FBI in Atlanta, but as the woman whose voice had shaken the pillars of silence. She adjusted the microphone. No notes. No teleprompter, just the truth. Power is not used to threaten the weak. Power is used to right wrongs. Her voice rang clear. I didn't stand up just because I'm a federal officer. I stood up because anyone can be a victim. And I won't wait until the next name becomes a hashtag to speak again. The room froze. Not a single cough, not a single camera click. She continued. This was never about personal vengeance. I don't need revenge. I needed the truth out in the open. Camille let the words breathe. I didn't want Officer Kyle Monroe fired. I wanted people to see how quickly a uniform can become a weapon, and how slowly the system reacts when that weapon is turned on the wrong target. She looked to her left, where a group of young cadets from the police academy sat, invited by her team. If you carry a badge, this isn't a story to fear. It's a standard to live by. She paused and held up her phone. It was the same phone that had recorded the entire incident, the evidence that had changed everything. This was my protection. Not a gun, not a rank, just a phone and the knowledge of my rights. Ask yourself, if I hadn't recorded it, would anyone have believed me? A murmur rippled through the crowd. She let the question linger. Now ask yourself this. How many people out there didn't have that option? How many voices were buried under silence because they didn't wear a suit or have a title or the clarity to hit record at the right time? There are hundreds of cases we never hear about because injustice wears a quiet face, because power, when unaccountable, hides its tracks. Camille's tone hardened, not angry, but cold steel. This moment is not closure. This moment is a mirror, and we are all responsible for what happens when we look away from what it reflects. She reached down and pulled out a small black box, a police body cam. She held it up. They say cameras are watching us. Good, let them watch. Let them record. Let them expose. Because if the presence of a camera changes how a badge behaves, then maybe it wasn't justice to begin with. Just performance. Silence again, but it was no longer the silence of tension. It was the silence of realization. She softened slightly. That night, when I saw that gun rise toward my face, I didn't think of policy. I thought of my daughter. I thought of what the headlines would say. I thought of what I'd become, a tragic mistake in someone's report. Her voice cracked, but only slightly. I made it home, but how many mothers never had that chance to say goodbye? Power does not protect the powerful. Power protects the vulnerable. She stepped back from the podium and looked across the room, eyes scanning every person. So from this day forward, I vow, every officer under federal jurisdiction will undergo training on racial bias. Every citizen complaint will be reviewed by an independent board. Every abuse of power will be investigated, not behind closed doors, but under the eyes of the people. She raised her voice slightly, but firmly. I am not here to soothe your guilt. I am here to demand your courage. The applause didn't come immediately. It came 5 seconds after she stepped back, but when it came, it was thunderous, not performative. Not polite, earned, because Camille Turner didn't just win her case, she woke up a city. Outside the hall, a young reporter caught up to her. Director Turner, one final question. What would you say to Officer Monroe today if he were standing here? She stopped, thought, then spoke without bitterness. I'd say this: I forgive you, but this country may never forget what you did. Let that memory teach the next man to think twice before drawing a gun on dignity. She turned away, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows behind her. By the end of that month, 5 Georgia cities launched civilian police roundtables. 2 counties passed body cam disclosure laws. And Camille Turner? She declined every TV offer and went back to work, behind the scenes, rewriting the rule book. Because true change doesn't come from sound bites. It comes from people like her, who didn't just survive injustice. She documented it, fought it, and rewrote the ending. This isn't just a story about Camille Turner. This is a story about every person who has ever been silenced, profiled, or threatened because of the color of their skin or the power they didn't have. If this story moved you, don't just watch, speak, share, act. Share this video with someone who needs to understand the truth. Comment below with your thoughts. Your voice matters here. Subscribe to this channel for more real stories that challenge injustice and spark change. Because the next time someone says, "That could never happen here," you'll know better. Injustice thrives in silence. Let's make sure the silence ends with us.